Hi, everyone. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about my new book that I'm writing. It's almost nearing publication, and I just wanted to start getting the word out about this book that I wrote. It's called Beyond the Battlefield: Stories of Tenacity and Mindful Guidance Along the Warrior's Path. So, interestingly, this book started as an online course that I was creating for gymnasts transitioning out of the sport. It was called Who Am I Now? The Transition to Life After Sport. And I was trying to get coaches and gymnasts interested in taking this course. And although there was interest, there weren't enough people who really wanted to take the time to do the pilot program that I was about to conduct. So, in hopes of making the course better, I ended up sending it to my former, it's called an executive officer or XO in the military when I was in the Army. And he looked it over very meticulously and he wrote me back and said, this might have a place within the military community. And he had recently retired from the Army and thought, well, some of these tools and the things that you talk about in the online course for gymnasts might be helpful for those in the military or veterans. So I started thinking about what he said. And so it morphed. This project that started as an online course for gymnasts retiring has now become a book that is it's really for anybody interested in reading it, but it's primarily targeted towards those serving in the military because the book is a retelling of 15 different interviews that I've done with either current active duty service members or those who have retired, so veterans. And I have interviewed people from the Navy, the Army, Air Force, those who were on the enlisted side, officers, males, females, trying to get a broad range of experiences and perspectives. And so I interviewed these people and retell their story. So I retell the story, and each chapter is a different interview. So it's a different person or couple. I actually interviewed a dual military couple. So that's the basic layout of the book. And then following each interview, I elaborate on what we talked about and address particular challenges or issues that came about as a result of the interview. Not the process itself, but just the things that came up in the interview, the struggles that service member endured and things that they wish they would have had, lessons learned. And I bring in the science behind the benefit of mindfulness and meditation because I do believe that these tools, although not a cure-all and not the answer to all of the problems in the military, could be very foundational tools if they were better understood, if they were more accessible, if they were more utilized within the military culture. Oftentimes, within that kind of mindset, the military mindset, things like meditation and mindfulness are like woo-woo or otherworldly, or that's just crystals and seance and fairy dust type of things. And yet, if we could debunk those myths, because it's not true, that's not what they are, and we could teach the brain science behind how mindfulness and meditation actually make our brains work better, they help us focus better, they help us to become more compassionate human beings, which, as I've been writing this book, I have questioned, is this a practice that the military wants to have? Because as we begin to do meditation and mindfulness, we make contact with our own suffering, which then opens us up to the suffering of other people, and ultimately could be a very good thing because it helps us to feel compassionate, it helps us to feel connected. And yet, if we want people in the military to be able to go out and potentially kill an enemy or be violent, can they do that alongside meditation? And my argument is that, or my hope would be that as these practices became more mainstream within the military, we would develop a much stronger force we would be more of a Department of Defense as opposed to being engaged so much in direct combat. That the leaders, I'm not saying anything bad about the leaders right now, but I do know that if our leadership could be more conscientious and if our leadership were more in touch with the repercussions of their decisions outside of our country, even within our country, the individual lives of each of these soldiers, which I tell about, they've been directly impacted by the decisions of the military as a whole. And so, on a big ideal scale, I'm thinking of a very conscientious military that is more compassionate. It is more aware of the impact of their decisions on maybe who we think of as the enemy isn't necessarily the enemy, and we see more human to human, which hopefully will ultimately bring more peace to the world. I know that sometimes combat is a necessity. That's why we have a military. And I think there are many other paths that could be taken before we need to resort to combat. Because combat, as we all know, has extreme repercussions on an individual level, on a systemic and societal level. So I've written this book with the hope that these stories will, one, help other service members connect and feel like they're not alone in their experiences and their struggles. I'm hoping that those who are unaffiliated with the military can read these stories, feel some more compassion, feel some more connection with those serving in the armed forces, because they deal with different stressors. I mean, we're all dealing with stressors, but there's something unique about military life that some people don't fully understand, that they think that everybody in the military is a ruthless killer. That's on an extreme, but there are those who still believe that, I think, and to debunk those myths, that everybody that I interviewed is a deeply compassionate and really wonderful human being, and they just happen to have to do some bad things in war. And then finally, I want to just open the reader's eyes to the need for more tools, to the need for more support. There are a lot of really wonderful things going on, both in the Veterans Administration and in the military, active duty military, bringing things like mindfulness. And I think meditation is making its way into the mainstream mentality, but there's still a long way to go. And so my hope is that this book can just be one more impetus towards acceptance of these practices, because they can be life-changing. They're very foundational tools from which other tools can be more readily used and accessible. So I wanted to share a little bit about the book and, begin to open dialogue, discussion. I hope that this book can reach as many people as possible, debunk myths around military life, debunk myths around meditation and mindfulness, and, hopefully open up some helpful resources by explaining the brain science behind it, by explaining how mindfulness and meditation are not seances, they're not otherworldly. In fact, they bring us more fully into the world in a way that helps us to respond as opposed to react, helps us be more in touch with ourselves and our emotions, which ultimately, I think, breeds a stronger, healthier, more resilient force in the long run. Thanks.